Hello everybody, welcome to our channel. My name is Jake and I saw The Brutalist and I'm reviewing The Brutalist. I'm sad because I think there was so much emphasis on the grandness, on the bigness, on the epic scale and beauty and length of this movie. You know, it's so big. That's what everyone talks about, The Brutalist, that I wasn't expecting the really quiet devastation and agony of what happens in this film. And I was just blown away. So I have a lot I want to talk about. The discourse around this movie, it's so fun. I will talk about the AI stuff. Whether or not I think this movie will stand the test of time, that's of course like an impossible thing to ask and think about, but it's still fun. First off, I want to say thank you very much to Nadia for encouraging me to go see this movie because of travel time to the theater, ending up being gone for like 5 hours. If you are raising a newborn baby, you understand the sacrifice of offering that to someone. So I felt very indulgent while seeing it. It felt like a big treat, like I was just eating a bunch of chocolate, but also chocolate that was poop because it made me feel bad. All right, maybe I was hallucinating some of the movie because I was so sleepy while I was seeing it. You know what movie theaters should sell? They should sell coffee. Why don't they do that? Why don't they do that? The spoiler section, it's going to be probably the bulk of what I have to say, but I'm going to just go ahead and put it out there that I think this is probably my second or third favorite movie of the year, behind Challengers. I'd say Challengers is my favorite. I'm in awe of what they were able to put on screen. I know everyone talks about the budget, but I'm trying not to think to grade it on a scale of, oh, they did it so cheap, so that makes it better. They got what they needed to get, and it looked really good. I mean, it's gorgeous to look at. The score is beautiful, but also eerie, and it has this dark undertone that really foreshadows what happens in the film. Adrien Brody gives just an incredibly raw emotional performance it breaks your heart many times over, about the immigrant experience, but it is also indirectly about the Holocaust. It's about ambition, it's about creativity and art. It's about a lot of things, and it is very ambivalent about a lot of stuff. I know there are people who see this movie, and especially considering the ending of the film, think that it is bluntly delivering a message, and I disagree with that. I think that simplistic way to view it, but I do think the ending actually complicates and continues to make murky the entire theme of the movie and what we're seeing. We're constantly, especially in the second half of this movie, we're constantly reviewing and reconsidering everything that came before, seeing these characters in a new light. Is it a perfect movie? I mean, no. What's a perfect movie? I don't know what that is. But there was this cloud hanging over the movie lately because, look, I mean, this just released wide and I was able to see it, but it's been in the conversation for months and months, especially with the Oscars. It has tons of Oscar nominations and very few people have seen it. So there was a big controversy about the use of AI. So I want to talk about that real quick. First off, the Big Picture podcast, they recently did an episode where they discussed the AI controversy, and I thought they handled it and brought a discussion around it in a very constructive way. I'm very against the use of AI, especially generative AI, where it is replacing creative roles. There was a piece that came out that said the movie used AI for altering Adrien Brody's Hungarian accent and then generating images of buildings for the end of the film. That was the impression. And on Twitter, that's what you'll see, oh crap, they used generative AI. They used AI. Adrien Brody's performance doesn't matter. It was all AI, all of this coming up, and I get the gut reaction because most people don't want viewers, people who love art, they don't want AI involved. I don't want AI involved in our art. I think that the knee-jerk reaction was the point of that article, and I think that this is a very deliberate awards tactic. It's so stupid that it's like the Oscars race, and that to bring this movie down a peg, the competing films and the competing studios are going to put out stuff like this. Since then, there's been more clarification from the director, from people who worked on the film, that the AI used for Adrien Brody's performance was used very, very little, specifically for when he's just speaking Hungarian, which he speaks with an accent throughout the film, but there are very small sequences where he speaks Hungarian, and I guess I've seen people compare it to like using auto-tune. So there are tools, like AI tools, that wouldn't always be called AI, but you can call them AI because our terminology for this stuff this is such a huge conversation. I hate that I have to be talking about this with this movie, but AI has become a marketing term for companies, and they're like relabeling tools that we've been using for years as AI. We are kind of like in this murky place of like, what is ethical? What is a good tool that helps with art? Like, I think about like Lord of the Rings when they were doing like crowd simulations and creating vast armies. Could you call that AI now? That would probably be called AI. Well, it's the AI armies for movies, and you're killing all of these jobs for extras. A very, very tricky and I think scary time, and people are right to be very nervous about the use of AI, and I think it's better to be a little more harsh than not. But the fact of the matter is that the use in this film, if it is even used, because also the director pointed out that there aren't AI images at the end of the film. Apparently one of the production designers based some of the images off of things that use generative AI. I can't even get into. I don't know exactly what it is, but basically there was a ton of pushback from the filmmakers being like, no, we definitely wouldn't. So I don't know. I have no idea. But the truth of the matter is that whatever they used or did or dabbled with, it didn't seem like intentionally like, hey, let's cut corners. And it also seems like it is way less than probably the standard practice of big Hollywood movies today. We just don't talk about it because they don't want it to be discussed, right? It seems kind of silly, and it's very discouraging that forces at play trying to make this movie the topic of discussion about ethical use of AI, and it's like, okay, this movie made for $10 million, shot on VistaVision. It's like, yeah, there is an industry problem, but I don't think this movie is the real good example of that, the real perpetrator to get upset about when there are so many movies now using it way more. And I don't even know if this movie is actually using it. So it's tricky. That's one thing to keep in mind. Again, I'm not advocating for the use of AI. I'm just saying that it's a little more complicated in this specific instance. So now that I've spent time discussing that, the movie itself, I think most people favor the first half of the movie over the second half because the first half is very much in that Godfather American epic, rags to riches, rising up through the world, building something great, harrowing at times and hard to watch, but there's a kind of atmosphere of hope and resilience. And the second half of the movie, let's just say, re-examines that just painfully realistic. That's something that I kept thinking of, like, the scenes move slowly. Like, even though there's a huge stretch of time in this movie, it's because there's lots of gaps in time. When we're actually in the moment within these periods, the scenes go, it's like very much like one scene following the next in sequential order, very strict time. Like it doesn't move super fast. It's very deliberate and really takes its time. And we're with this character. We're with Adrian Brody's character, Laszlo Toth, who's an architect, Hungarian architect, fled Europe, and he's separated from his wife, who's still in Europe, and he's trying to make a name for himself, and he has these principles of, he wants to work for himself. He wants to... The way the exposition is done, and that's something about this movie, like, every scene, no scene feels completely cliched. Like, although there are cliche elements and the story is very mythic in a way, of like the mythic immigrant narrative. The way we enter into each scene, the way it's shot, the choice of not having a lot of master shots. And of course, this would be an effect too of shooting on VistaVision film, with fucking, like, hasn't been used since the 1960s, and making a cheap film. So, like, you imagine they have to be very, very deliberate with how they're choosing their shots and not getting just coverage of everything. And that's why each scene has this really weird dynamic of sometimes we're looking at a reaction shot of these other characters that aren't even talking, and you're wondering why is the emphasis on here? It makes you think, and that's a benefit to shooting film. I truly think that the limitation can bring really interesting results. Not every time, but a lot of times when you're just shooting digitally and you have a million cameras running Ridley Scott style. And it reflects the like modernist aesthetic that the whole movie has of things being slightly off, uncomfortable, the music, beautiful piano, but this like asynchronicity, these grating sounds. We're in a world now after World War II that has this sheen of perfection, but it is fundamentally corrupt. There's something wrong. We've been living in that shadow ever since. The second half of this movie shocked me a lot. And Felicity Jones's performance, I really like her character and I like what she brought to the movie. Things get harder with her there, and I think that's so important. I don't want to get into spoilers. I'll talk about this more in spoilers, but I'll just say that the dynamics shift. Everything shifts. You get some of the stereotypical, like, oh, he's too focused on his art, etc. But a lot of it is just about pain, memory, what actually matters ultimately. I think a lot of people come away with this movie thinking, oh, it's a statement about how art is supreme and, the most important thing. And if you make good art, I think it's so much more complicated and sad that like art is not enough. Like, I think that's something I was considering. A lot of people like to focus on art. It is a healing thing and it is a very productive, positive thing, but it is not everything, and it can be a negative thing. It can be like a drug, and kind of reminds me of The Fabelmans in a way. That was such a surprising element of Spielberg's like biography and how he framed like art and filmmaking as a sort of toxic drug. And that's an element here. But what I came away with is like art is powerful and helps us when we need it. It's not everything. It isn't. Guy Pearce. Chemistry with Adrian Brody. Just great. I've seen parallels made between Brady Corbet and Paul Thomas Anderson, and this movie definitely has some of that, especially the master vibes. This dynamic relationship between two men, the power imbalance, the 1950s, obviously, the aesthetics. But I think Corbet is just interested in so many different things. Yeah, they're such different filmmakers. Ultimately, I came away with this movie feeling really moved and conflicted within, not about the movie. I knew it was a great movie after I saw it, but within myself about how I felt about making art, trying to have principles in this world. What does success mean? I mean, all of these really questions in life in general. And I'm glad that the movie brought those questions up and then complicated them and then left you spinning at the end of it going, well, shit. It's not an uplifting film. It's brutal. All right, let's talk spoilers, everyone. I really like how Felicity Jones, when she enters the film, the priorities and what matters shifts so suddenly. It's so weird because you think that Laszlo would be so happy having her there, but it seems like he's just suddenly feels so heavy. It's no longer just about the idealism of what you lost, but the reality of trying to move forward every day. It's the romance of American Dream versus the reality of how do you live, how do you try to survive and do what's right for others, when to survive before you trying to just do what's right for you. We see earlier in the film Laszlo as such a generous person. He's standing in a bread line, sticks up for the guy and his boy, being like, hey, he needs food, he's just a little boy. And that later on he loses that. He becomes obsessed with his art, and very naturalistic, the naturalistic feel of the movie, the realism of the movie in the first half breaks away and becomes way more abstract, a lot more time, jumps in time, starting and stopping. There's a scene where he gives his wife heroin to help with her pain, and that's like just pure art house, just going for it. Like, unashamed of being really artsy, and that whole sequence in Italy with the quarry and the rock, and then that horrifying sequence with Guy Pearce, what he does, what his character does to Laszlo. It literalizes what he's been doing in a very visceral way that when it happened, I was thinking, like, do we really need to go this far and depict this, sexual assault? Does that really benefit the movie a lot? But I think that it is a choice. It's a bold choice. And I think that on questions of that, I tend to just side with the filmmaker had brought me in thus far that I just went with. I was very shocked and disturbed, and I was supposed to be, It really made things more visceral. His experience, it's so sad, especially after that. And then see also the perspective of Felicity Jones's character, her giving up so much for his career, she's, finally I want to mention the epilogue. We go to the 1980s, we're in Venice, and we're seeing a retrospective of Laszlo's work. What I was confused about was, did he build any more buildings? Or is this just art that he's done? I got the impression that he did end up succeeding. I was kind of surprised that he was able to have a career after that, but he doesn't say anything. He's an old man, but his niece says a few words for him and ends up saying something like, in matters of art, etc., it's about the destination, not the journey. You could totally be like, oh, the movie is just like art conquers all. Art is the most important thing. And because Laszlo hid these secret messages in his art, it was worthwhile. And I just think that, no, that's so opposite to so much of what happens in the movie. And it's not Laszlo saying that, it's someone remembering him. And I think that's part of the tragedy and confusion there. I don't know, there's lots of different interpretations you could have with that. What do you guys think of The Brutalist? I could just go on and on and on. I would love for Nadia to see this so I can talk with her about it, but I really want to see it again. It's weird. I already have that urge to see it again. Cinema, am I right? If you've seen it, let me know what you think. How do you interpret that ending? All right, everyone, have a great day. Bye-bye.